Do not come. Do not come.
I'm coming. I'm coming!
All right, so the first pay-per-view of 2025 for the UFC is officially in the books, and I'm so excited to talk about it. There's so many things that we could break down and that we will break down, obviously. I figure first, though, we'll start just with like the Intuit Dome. I think it's cool because we didn't even know if the fights were going to be there until a few days before, just because of all the wildfires and stuff in California. Obviously, hope that everybody's all good over there, but it's good to see that we could actually have an event there and that the UFC could still put on a show for that California crowd. And they clearly appreciated it because I thought the vibe in the Intuit Dome was really awesome. The atmosphere was really energetic. And then even presentation wise, I thought it was really cool. And I texted you comparing it to the Sphere because they hyped up the Sphere so much. And I thought the Sphere was cool, as we talked about at the time. But considering they didn't hype up what the Intuit Dome was going to be like at all before this card, and then seeing what we ended up getting, especially for those championship fights for the walkouts and stuff, the presentation at that arena was just insane. So I just wanted to give the credit to the Intuit Dome for putting on a cool show for the fans there in California, and then also just to the fans there for helping us get more into it with all their energy. But what did you kind of think of the whole vibe of this card and what was kind of going on during the week, obviously?
Yeah, so you don't really expect two fights to be totally changed, but I think the both fights were still the same caliber level of fight that the original fights were. So instead of Dariush and Moicano, you got Spivac and Almeida, and that delivered in a finish as well. So. And then, unfortunately, Moicano stepping in on short notice against the pound-for-pound champ. So who knows how quickly Islam might have finished Arman if that fight went through, but that's still more of a testament to Islam Makhachev and just the greatness that he's displaying right now at 155. And yeah, that's really all you can leave the night. That's all you could leave this pay-per-view thinking, pretty much, was who can beat really both of the champions on this card right now.
Well, let's hop into it then, man, because for those who didn't really see what was going on during fight week, kind of a crazy week at lightweight for the UFC, just because, like you mentioned, Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan 2 is supposed to be the fight. We're all hyped for that because Arman had a very close fight with Islam a few years ago. And then literally the day before, during weigh-ins, it comes out that Arman is going to be out of the fight and Islam Makhachev needs an opponent. Obviously, Moicano versus Dariush is on the card. And everybody loves Money Moicano, man. I think me and you could agree on that. And then Moicano steps up on like 36 hours notice against Islam Makhachev, but it didn't work out for him in the end, even though it was a great opportunity because Islam Makhachev submitted Moicano in the first round with a Darce choke, beautiful Darce choke, by the way, and becomes the first UFC lightweight to defend his title 4 times, which I thought was really interesting because we've had a lot of great lightweight champions over the years. And, man, I mean, where could you really start with this fight? I mean, just the fight itself, I would say this, and I know I texted you this too during the night when I was watching it. It's crazy to me that Islam Makhachev is so good on the ground, even against someone like Moicano, who's known as a really good jiu-jitsu guy. Just one mistake against Islam Makhachev ruins fights for people. I mean, Moicano even talked about it today, actually. When he said that Islam kind of gave him the impression that he was going to be able to get back to his feet, but he only kind of did that so Moicano would expose his neck. And obviously when he wrapped up that Darce against Moicano, it was, lights out pretty much immediately. And I give Moicano a lot of credit just for not being gun-shy against someone as good as Islam, but Islam proved why, like you said, he's probably pound for pound number one right now, and he submitted Moicano with ease in that fight. I was really impressed with Islam in this one, but what did you think of the whole fight week debacle and then the fight itself?
Yeah, originally, kind of something to like touch on Armand, the injury and all that. Um, you know, there's gonna be theories and stuff out there one way or another, and to hear that he won't be getting rebooked immediately as well leaves more to be questioned out there. Um, so when you see Moicano stepping up, who's already scheduled to fight a tough challenger in Beneil Dariush, I mean, you feel bad for Beneil Dariush for one that his fight gets taken off, but um, it does leave you with just that even more of like, hey, this guy's a huge underdog, and everyone's got a puncher's chance, but I think Moicano brings the more for a lot of these Brazilian fighters and guys who are as good as jiu-jitsu as him. I don't think you see as many who like to stand and strike like Moicano and even wrestle as well. He's a good wrestler. I'd say he's sometimes would even like to wrestle more than jiu-jitsu, but I think here it was good to at least hear him super confident and all that, right? He's talking about how, "Oh, I'm prepared for a southpaw anyways with Benil," and so he's got um, the matchup now with Islam. But I think either way, um, yeah, did we want to see a longer fight? Yeah, of course, but hey, there's levels to this game after all. So uh, I guess I don't think Renato had so much to lose because I think it's fair to say that he'll be back fighting for a title at some point, I think, but um, yeah, that's how it's still that opportunity just like comes and goes, so it's you feel bad for the guy, but yeah, Islam, yeah, it's
Just the way it
it's
is, man.
just the way it is, yeah,
I
it's
mean,
good.
Islam Makhachev's ground game is just incredible. Like I said, one mistake against that guy and it's over. I mean, you even think of the fight that we went to against Dustin Poirier. That was a great fight. Obviously, a lot more competitive than this one. And Dustin Poirier makes one mistake in the fifth round and then gets darsed a minute later. And then same thing with this fight, except a little obviously different circumstances. Moicano's getting up and Islam wraps up the neck, gets the darce choke again. This time in the first round, it's just amazing to see what this guy's capable of on the ground. And he's a protege of Habib, but he fights in kind of a different way on the ground than Habib does because Habib relied a lot on ground and pound to open people up for submissions, while Islam, he's very good at like smothering you on the ground and advancing position and making you make a mistake in the grappling area rather than just ground and pounding somebody to make them have them make a mistake in there.
Yeah,
So
Islam's got a unique way of passing the darts too. He likes to grab the wrist and apply pressure that way instead of like the bicep and kind of just as more and more pressure gets applied, it's like his wrist is just like underneath your throat and your Adam's apple, and that's why I mean if you don't tap like I don't necessarily because here we'll bring up Patty Pimblett real quick and what he was talking about and how you gotta go out on your shield when you're in a title fight there. You don't just tap immediately. I'm thinking like, well, that's really easy to say when you're not the one in the choke, because I don't think Ronaldo Moicano is necessarily going to sleep if you know. He'll probably go to sleep in a much worse way. Whereas if Islam probably has like the bicep and is just around him like that, then okay, he's probably gonna pass out and stuff. But when you're getting choked out like that, like oh, it's like there's no you have to tap or else that'll mess up your entire career. That won't just
well,
put you to sleep for a night. That'll
people
mess
talk
up your
about Islam's strength too. I mean, you gotta imagine even if like you're kind of losing consciousness, it's gotta hurt like hell to have a dude like that squeezing on your neck because he fights at
yeah, the
lightweight, but the dude
pressure on
walks
the
around at like
neck too.
190. So, and you gotta remember too, Moicano used to fight at 145. So it's a smaller guy in there against Islam who cuts a lot of weight to even get to 155. So I don't know. I think if the fight's over, you should tap. What are you proving? Like, I know some people, I guess Patty Pimblett included, think that you all go out on your shield, and that's obviously commendable when people decide to do that. But I mean, that fight was over. there was no way he was getting out of that one, and not especially with all. I think he had a decent amount of time left too, even if somehow he would have gotten out of that. So, and it's funny how Islam's signature choke has kind of turned into the Darce at this point. I remember back in the day when Tony Ferguson used to be called the Darce Knight, but now Islam kind of has taken that throne from him. And when you talk about Islam now, you have to wonder what's next. Initially, after the fight, I kind of thought that maybe you rebook the Arman Tsarukyan fight, but Dana White was very much against that, said that Arman's going to have to fight again now before he gets an Islam Makhachev fight. So you go to the drawing board. Well, what's next for Islam? Who's in the lightweight division? Who's around right now? Charles Oliveira. Everybody loves Du Bronx. There could always be a rematch there, even with what the first fight, or with how the first fight went. Maybe that happens, maybe not. I think personally, maybe you could put Arman versus Oliveira in the title eliminator type of fight. Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker are going to be fighting, as we'll get to. I don't want to talk too much about that fight yet. Ilia Topuria has talked a lot about Islam Makhachev possibly moving up to 155 and trying to get that belt. And then Islam has talked about maybe even moving up to 170, fighting somebody who he kind of likes in Bilal Muhammad, because they share the same management, they know each other. But he would even be open, he'd be open to maybe even going to middleweight to fight Dricus du Plessis, and he's very confident in his own abilities in that fight. And that's kind of crazy to think about. It's a 30-pound jump in weight classes if Islam Makhachev would want to fight Dricus du Plessis. And obviously, DDP has to get through Sean Strickland in February if we want to even entertain that idea. But just the fact that we're even talking about it just shows you why this guy's so good and why he's even being talked about as number one pound for pound. And I do think right now Islam is number one pound for pound just because he's fought so many killers and beaten them in the way that he has. But I don't know, man. Like, is there anything for you that you want to see next for Islam in that huge list that I pretty much just gave? Because it's crazy considering there's so many options for him at different weight classes at this point.
I like the Oliveira rematch a lot. And I think too, Charles Oliveira's, I think he's getting better, even better as a striker. I mean, he's not getting any younger, that's for one, but I think he is embracing his stand-up more, judging from his last fight, at least with Michael Chandler. That's what I think. And obviously, he can still be able to hold. And if Islam can tap someone like Charles Oliveira again, then there wouldn't be really any denying at all if there still is, because there's maybe someone would still have cause to leave the jury out on Islam Makhachev, whether or not he really is number one pound for pound, or whether or not he is truly somebody that nobody can beat right now, because he did just beat number 10 stepping in on a short notice. So, however that might go, but I think Charles Oliveira is still, if we're not talking about Arman Tsarukyan, obviously, or you could just do that fight between Arman Tsarukyan and Charles Oliveira and see who gets that title shot. Because I don't think Islam's going to have really any problem waiting. I mean, Islam will fight. He fought once last year, and
Well, right now too. I mean, obviously, if he fights in January, I think it's safe to say that he fights at least one or two more times this year. But you got to remember with him too, with Ramadan, he doesn't fight in that spring time period, just because it's obviously tough to get through a training camp when you're not able to eat or drink during the day. So I would imagine, March right now is what they have booked, up to. So April would technically be the earliest. Don't think it'll be in April. Maybe May or June. Maybe July if they want to do an international fight week, because Islam's such a big star. But who knows, man. I think that he kind of is in a position right now where he's such a dominant champion that he can kind of sit back and wait a little bit to see what happens in the division, just because, I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen in lightweight. Even Max Holloway, he could go up to lightweight right now and win a fight against a top contender, and then maybe you're saying maybe he should fight Islam. So that's my view. I think a lot could happen.
I can
between now and
understand why he would leave out 3 other champions as well as potential opponents, because well, maybe not so much Bilal Muhammad, because we still have to see him defend his belt, of course, and the welterweight division is, I think, definitely one of the more stacked divisions in UFC, but almost all these divisions their champions have a pretty tight grip on their division right now, just considering the people that they had to beat to get there, and just even with who they've defended against. So we've got Dricus du Plessis already booked to fight Sean Strickland, so we'll see what happens there. But I mean, clearly Ilya's really proven himself, Merab's really proven himself, Pantoja, all these guys are really proven themselves, and so I understand why he would want to why he would keep these options out here, but I think the more likely fight would probably be Ilya Topuria, but I don't think that would happen anytime soon either. So maybe with Dricus du Plessis, if he beats Sean Strickland, because middleweight is kind of lacking those. Not that it's lacking those true top contenders. It's kind of just
Hamzat's just there lurking right now, dude.
That's
really it,
though. That is true. Yeah, that is really it, because it has been like kind of the same crop of names for a little while now.
Well, DDP, he's beaten a lot of those guys.
And he's beaten a lot of
Adesanya, Strickland already, Rob Whittaker.
Yeah.
So Paulo Costa's not really near a title shot right now. I think Hamzat's the only other guy that deserves a shot right now besides Strickland.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. I don't know. I would like to see Islam stay at lightweight for his next fight, just because I think between now and whenever he's going to fight again, I think something will happen where we'll get another clear contender, whether it be a title eliminator with Arman Tsarukyan and Charles Oliveira, or if Max Holloway can break into that top 3 if he goes up to lightweight, or like I said, even Dan Hooker or Justin Gaethje, depending on what goes down in that fight in March. So Islam definitely has a lot of options, and right now, Dana White says he's pound for pound number 1, not John Jones anymore. Can you believe it? And that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on moving forward, because I do think Islam has a lot of different options. But unless there's anything else you want to mention about that fight, I say we move on to the co-main event, because there was a lot to talk about in that fight too, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. We can go to the co-main. Another successful title defense for Islam, no matter how you slice it, and that's that pretty much. There's another guy I just don't see losing for a while now.
Record breaking, man.
Yeah.
4th title defense at lightweight. Isn't that crazy, by the way, that nobody's done that at lightweight yet, even Habib? So
I will ask.
Shout out.
I'll ask you this though: if he would fare better moving up or down.
Islam, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, he's definitely not moving down. I think you'd have to cut a leg off to get to 45 or something. Because I think if he fights Ilya,
Ilya would come up.
So he would definitely move up. There's no shot he moves down.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
So,
Islam doesn't even seem that interested, though, in Ilya Topuria.
Well,
and I kind of get that.
I get that, too, in that
he's
case.
beaten Volkanovski twice. So it's like, what does beating another featherweight champion prove? I mean, well, that's obviously kind of unfair.
To defend his belt, yeah.
Right, like I'd rather see him fight other lightweights, or again move up weight classes to maybe fight somebody closer to his actual size outside of the cage. But I guess time will tell in that aspect. But let's talk about this co-main event a little bit. Merab Dvalishvili becomes the first man to defeat Umar Nurmagomedov, wins the fight via unanimous decision, 48-47. 2 times, and then 149-46. Instant classic. Probably an early contender for fight of the year. I mean, just an amazing fight. Super competitive from start to finish. The atmosphere in the arena was electric during it. You start off in the first couple of rounds. Umar did a good job at actually backing Merab up and keeping him on the outside, picking him apart, getting a couple of takedowns. But then, I would say, around round 3, in the middle of that, seems like Merab was starting to change the way he was going about his footwork, really cutting off the cage and pushing the pace against Umar. And he shot so many takedowns. I don't know what the exact number is. I should have looked that up before, but And then also, obviously, Merab has so many combinations that he throws at people, and it's just so exhausting to fight Merab. And Umar experienced that firsthand. You could really see the drop off in those championship rounds. And ultimately, if you think about it, that's why it's called championship rounds, because that's when the champ is expected to show that experience and show that they can get through those later rounds and that adversity. And Umar,
Oh
even though he's
yeah, well
undefeated, just couldn't yet.
that's just another championship round is just another day in the office for Merab. I mean,
Merab could fight
yeah,
12 rounds like it's boxing if he really had to, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
that's ultimately what won him this fight, because Umar looked really good in those first couple of rounds, but once the championship rounds hit, there was really nothing that he could do against Merab.
It is one thing when you don't get hit as much, that's for sure, and you're just able, when you can take somebody down really at any given at a moment's notice, and not have your opponent doesn't have much of a defense for it. Um, it does mean, like, okay, you're able to stay on top of someone and all that, but the whole I guess stigma with Merab was that, oh well, he's gonna stay on top of somebody. And you heard it all with the Sean O'Malley fight, as if it's Merab's fault that Sean O'Malley doesn't have much of an answer for his takedowns. But when you're not getting hit, it's still, when I kind of watch even like a fight like Yuri and Jamal Hill before this, when you could see how tired Jamal Hill was getting and all that, how much they were hitting each other, and that was only a 3 round fight. It's like, dude, if that went to 5 rounds, like, I don't. It's just so crazy in the moment. Like, how do these, how you train and prepare for to go 25 minutes and all that. But at the pace that Merab does it, it just makes it even. It makes me question it even more, because it's like, I mean, it's just he doesn't get tired for a second, and you saw how tired Umar was on the other hand, and you know, yeah, they train different there in Dagestan. We know that, obviously, but he
Apparently,
was,
Umar needs to go to Georgia, though, to learn
yeah.
whatever Merab has learned.
Merab was ready to run a marathon, and Umar was only ready to run like a 10K. So
That's a good analogy. I like that.
yeah,
And then, like, you do think about it, though. When I think of bantamweight history in the UFC, you could argue that Merab in cage is one of the most dominant champs we've seen at that weight class. We were talking a little bit about the history of that division before we started, just because Dominic Cruz is the first person you think of when you think of dominant bantamweights. But even when he was fighting in both of his championship reigns, I don't think there was ever really a vibe that nobody could touch him. And even same thing with TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt, Henry Cejudo, Sean O'Malley. I just think that this is the first time we've seen a bantamweight champion who truly just looks unbeatable right now. Like, Umar Nurmagomedov had never lost a pro fight, and then he goes in there against Merab Dvalishvili, and even he can't keep up with that pace that Merab puts up. It's just unlike anything I've ever seen before. I mean, even Merab losing those first 2 rounds, it doesn't do anything to his cardio. Merab just keeps coming forward and cuts off the cage, hits you with all these combinations, constantly is trying to take you down. It's just so exhausting to fight a guy like that. And Merab could go 5 rounds, 10 rounds, 20 rounds at this point. Like, it's just, I don't know who you could put in against this guy right now who could compete with that. It's not even like he's super technically sound. He's very hittable. It's not like he's the best wrestler in the world. People can stuff his takedowns, but it's just that pace and constantly just in your face over and over, whether it be with the striking or the grappling. I don't know who competes with that right now. I just don't.
Well, yeah. I'll retract a little bit what I said about the Sean O'Malley fight, and Sean not having much of an answer for the takedowns. I said it's more of just the ground game altogether, and because when he does cut off the cage from you like that, and he is throwing this flurry of combinations, and he's get you up against the fence, and just that Muay Thai style anyways. You need, when a guy like that gets you up against the fence and gets you in a clinch, then you can really just, like, I mean, I feel like the fight could even end right there. But Merab's style, Yeah, I think Marab's style allows him to just you know, just tire a guy out over the course of 5 rounds, and yeah, it's a super effective strategy one way or the other. I mean, I think this fight, if people aren't totally convinced now that Marab is a complete fighter, then uh, I don't know what it'll really take. But I mean, because when it comes to his striking, anyways, in his stand up, I mean, the guy, he clearly doesn't have the most range to start, but he's powerful. He can throw. He can land. Um, and that, I mean, that's really it. I mean, if Marab starts walking people down, and if the guy has to circle and circle, and Marab is just center stage the whole time throwing on the front foot, then there's nothing anybody can say at all. Like he'll be capable of beating anybody, everybody, and he will go down as an all-time great. As simple as that, I think.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder too, what could even be next for him? Because you look at the bantamweight rankings, he's beaten a lot of these guys on his way to the title, and I think right now the only fight that is in that like upper echelon of bantamweight that would even matter to Marab right now would be Song Yadong versus Henry Cejudo. I figure maybe if Song could get that win, maybe you could give him a title shot off that. But is anyone really seeing that fight and being like, yeah, I think that's the guy to beat Marab? Like, sure, he's a great striker and he's a good all-around fighter, and maybe he could knock him out cold because he's got so much power. But I just don't know if he can keep up with that pace. I mean, if Umar can't keep up with that pace, or if Sean O'Malley can't keep up with that pace, I just don't know who can. It's super impressive. I mean, even Piotr Jan, he got destroyed by Marab. It's insane to see what this guy's capable of at this weight class, especially when you consider he's not even the most technical guy or the most athletic guy. Because Umar, especially in those early rounds, he was a lot faster than Marab on the feet, and that's why he was picking him apart the way he was. But Marab just doesn't go away, and his corner telling him to cut off the cage more and then him doing it immediately, it just changed the whole outlook of that fight. And I thought it was 2-2 going into the fifth, and then Marab obviously kind of clowned on him in the fifth round. You know, it wasn't a crazy one-sided round. I thought Marab won it, but I think maybe him taunting Umar at the end like that kind of sealed it, even though he didn't do as much in that round. He seemed a bit more cautious than he was in rounds 3 and 4.
Yeah,
but still super impressive, especially against a guy who's as good as Umar is. It's funny just to see him.
You gotta
clowning
sell
on him
it.
like
You
that.
gotta sell it like you won either way.
I mean, that was a great fight, man.
Yeah.
Everybody loved that fight.
That's why that's why at the end of every fight, if you go the distance, you gotta put your hands up regardless, because
Well, unless you're Yuri, as we'll get to.
Yeah. At least, because you don't know how these judges are what they're thinking first of all, what fight they're watching, but at the same time, if you go the distance with somebody who's trained to go and stuff, and is capable of finishing anyone, like anybody who steps in there, they're capable of, no matter how many people might think Bilal Muhammad can't finish anybody, he can do it. We'll set to see if he'll do it with as the champ, but that's the credit you gotta give anyway. So like I say, I'll just retract it back to Marab. I think if he starts these combos start landing with that much more power, and I mean, if he knocks someone down, even like he could just jump on top of them and tap them, I think so. But here, I mean, he did what he had to do to beat Nurmagomedov, and he defended the belt against somebody that everybody was clamoring for him to fight, and he did, and claiming that he was ducking Umar the whole time. But now it's history. So
needs to be said though too, Umar does deserve a lot of credit to only have fought one guy in that upper echelon at bantamweight, and then to go in there against a champion like Marab, who's clearly so good. And he put up a pretty good fight. I mean, like I said, 2-2 going into the fifth round. I think he still has a lot of options, even coming off a loss, just because he got fast-tracked to the title in that sense. He still hasn't fought a bulk of the contenders at bantamweight. So the road to a second title shot for Umar is going to be a lot harder, but I have no doubt after that fight that he is certainly capable of getting there again, and if not very soon, depending on who you're going to match him up against. But yeah, man, this was an awesome fight. I do think that we're going to be talking about this even at the end of the year as one of the best fights of 2025, and it's cool that we got it in basically the very beginning of the year. So I was super excited. But then even the fight before that was a fight of the year type of contender with Yuri Prochazka and Jamal Hill. And for those who didn't see that, Yuri Prochazka knocked out Jamal Hill in the third round after pretty much a 2.5 round war in that fight. So, I mean, where do we even begin with Yuri Prochazka? I mentioned the defensive side of it when we were talking about the last fight, obviously. He did look very much improved with his defense, not really in the sense that he was keeping his hands up the whole time, but I thought his head movement looked incredible compared to his last few fights. And similar to Merab, but for different reasons, I think that Yuri's another guy who's just so exhausting to fight because he's another one who has insane cardio. He doesn't really get tired, but then you factor in just all of the crazy movements and footwork, creative striking, all the feints. Like, you have to fight at Yuri's pace because if you try to fight at your own, he's going to hit you with something that you haven't seen before. I mean, you remember that Dominic Reyes fight when he hit him with that spinning elbow. This dude is capable of some crazy shit in there, and obviously what he did to Jamal Hill was absolutely incredible, and a really fun fight. And I was super impressed with Yuri. I think you could argue this was one of the better wins of his career when you factor in the defense combined with the offense this time. I was super impressed with Yuri in this one.
Well, for on Jamal Hill's side of it, I think part of me thinks that this was a very favorable matchup for him, a very favorable fight for him to get that. I think he's a guy right now that a former champion feels like, okay, well, I fought Alex on the biggest card of last year, and he finished me the way he did, and that was a huge moment and all, and
that's Herb Dean's fault. As Derek Lewis would say. No,
huge viral moment. You could even factor that in too. I think this is a fight that he kind of sees that. Well, I have to leave, no question about it. I have to have a spectacular finish, and whereas a lot of people, not to say, I mean, coming into the fight, I think the main point with Jamal Hill and how he can win this fight is, well, he hits hard, and it does take that one punch for him, whereas Yuri kind of either one throws something at you that you've never seen, or he just lines up the combinations and puts you down that way. I think this fight showed me that Jamal Hill isn't the hardest hitter that as hard a hitter that people might really think he is, but he is capable of racking up the points throughout each round. And if this fight did go the distance, then I think he would have had a pretty strong case of winning it. But that's not how that went, so it doesn't really matter. But
I mean, I agree with you. I thought that stylistically, I kind of favored Jamal in this, and I even mentioned that when we were kind of previewing it last week, just because of Yuri's defensive woes, which, like I said, he obviously clearly improved in this fight in that aspect. But Jamal is so technically sound with his boxing, and in this fight, he was throwing a lot of good front kicks too, which you see from him sometimes, but in this fight, he was doing a lot of good work with it. And, he hurt Yuri a couple of times. They both hurt each other a few times. That's what I'm saying. This is a really good fight. I think the fight after it kind of took away from the magic that this fight was, in all honesty, just because it was kind of a bigger stage, being a championship fight. But Yuri looked really good. Jamal also looked really good, considering he's kind of been out for a minute now, and his last fight was obviously a brutal knockout loss. So I was impressed by both guys, but Yuri obviously gets the win with a great finish there at the end. And you have to wonder now, too, where does this put Yuri in the title hunt? Because right now at 205, there's a lot going on. Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev have to fight now at UFC 313. That fight got booked. Again, we'll get to all that stuff near the end of the show with the breaking news that got announced on this card. But right now there's a title fight. Yuri's kind of in a position where he's lost to the champ twice now in brutal fashion. So I would imagine he's probably rooting for Ankalaev to win, because I think if Ankalaev wins, he has more of a chance at getting another title fight than he might against Pereira. But who knows? Because right now at light heavyweight, Pereira's kind of cleaning out the division. The only other fight that I could see if Alex wins is maybe you rematch him versus Jan Blachowicz, because that was a close fight if you remember back to when Alex debuted at 205. But personally, I think you could have Jan Blachowicz versus Yuri Prochazka right now to kind of fill that gap in the meantime. And then the winner of that could get a title fight, because let's say Jan wins, you could argue he deserves the Pereira rematch right now. If Yuri wins, he has an impressive win streak once again. And hey, maybe you could argue that defensively he's gotten better, and maybe he could do something different in a third fight with Pereira.
Yeah,
but who knows?
Here's the thing, right? You just mentioned how Jamal was throwing nice front kicks that Yuri was maybe able to withstand, but
I'm not saying Yuri would win the fight. I'm just giving you like hypotheticals, like thinking forward, like what could happen at light heavyweight. If Yuri gets 2 huge wins in the top 5 and there's nobody for Alex to fight, it could be possible. I mean, we can go in the rankings right now. Let's see who else is kind of up there. Rakic is another guy who's a sleeper in that division. Carlos Ulberg has gotten himself up to number 6. Can't forget about Khalil Roundtree Jr. after his fight with Alex Pereira. It's interesting right now at light heavyweight, and Alex Pereira is obviously building a resume for himself.
Blachowicz fight, that I think that's fair. Blachowicz Glover Teixeira beat Jan Blachowicz, and then Yuri beat Glover Teixeira. So I think that's something that could work for sure if you line those two up against each other.
I would just love to see it, like stylistically, even if it had nothing to do with the title picture.
Yuri's technicality versus Jan Blachowicz's power, I think that makes sense.
You wonder too what Jan could do against Yuri in the grappling realm, if he can take him down and maybe hold him there and beat him up on the ground. Because Yuri has a good ground game, but Jan's ground game is very underrated. I feel like people don't talk about that enough, because he has legendary Polish power, as we've all talked about in the past. But yeah, man, I just right now, obviously Alex Pereira has the title fight against Ankalaev, and Yuri's gonna need an opponent in the meantime. So I don't know. I think Jan Blachowicz would be the rightful choice for that fight. But hey, maybe you could even put him against Khalil Roundtree. I think that would be a fun one too. So maybe, honestly, Khalil could be I'm kind of convincing myself now. I'm thinking about that on the feet. That could be a really fun fight too. So I think there's a decent amount of options for Yuri, but I don't think he should probably get that third title fight against Pereira yet. So that's just my thoughts on it. And then you move on to the fight before that. Heavyweight fight. Gelton Almeida versus Sergey Spivac. Obviously, this was initially on the prelims. Got bumped up to the main card after the main event fell apart. And honestly, couldn't have really been any better for a main card fight, because it was a very quick finish, a fun fight in the short time that we had it. Just because they had some fun grappling exchanges, and then on the feet, out of nowhere, Gelton Almeida just hit Spivac with that massive shot. And I do commend Almeida for the composure for the finish, because he's a guy who's gassed out at times in the past. I think that in this fight, he did a good job at staying composed, getting the takedown easily, and then getting into mount. And when Gelton Almeida has you in full mount, forget it. It's over. And he just brutally beat the crap out of Spivac and won the fight in that aspect. I was really impressed with Gelton.
You stick to what you know pretty much, and that's what's so scary about facing a guy that you kind of know can take you down at a moment's notice, or just whenever he wants or feels like it. That when they do hit you with that, it does still take that one shot that they can land, like
especially heavyweight.
Yeah, especially heavyweight.
I didn't like the commentary team though saying. I mean, obviously it doesn't matter in the end because he got the finish, but they were saying how he should stay standing against Spivac. Well, why? If he's hurt, he's going to be able to take him down easily and get into a position where he could finish him like you said, where he's comfortable on the ground. I get it, like from like the commentary perspective, like, well, you have him hurt on the feet, maybe you hit him with one or two more punches, you put him out cold. But considering without what Almeida ended up doing on the ground, I think that you could argue he made a pretty damn good decision. So that's just me. That's how I view it. And then you think about maybe what's next for Almeida. He called out Cyril Gane. That's a fight that I would love to see. I think stylistically, the classic striker versus grappler. That's a fight that I think anyone would like to see at heavyweight, wouldn't you think?
Most definitely. More in the sense that if Cyril gets taken down, it's how is he going to recover? Because I think he would be capable of standing back up. But, I think Gelatin will just keep going back to the well, and that's going to obviously add up throughout the course of a fight, whether or not it's tiring out Cyril Gane or it's adding up to points and control time for Gelatin Almeida. So it is up. I think Gelatin Almeida is closer to that. Might be closer to that title shot than a lot of people might think. But at the same time, I think Gelatin has also already been known and has been getting his fair share of credit and hype for that throughout the past year or two anyway. So it's more about how the UFC sees him, and actual people with sway and stuff want to book him. So
well, let's say he gets the Gane fight. Right now, on Monday when we're recording this, Almeida is ranked number 6, and then Cyril Gane is ranked number 2. So if Almeida could get a win over the number 2 contender in the division, that's definitely worthy of the conversation of having a title shot. So kind of like what we were talking about at the main event, I think some things need to kind of play out. Who knows when John Jones and Tom Aspinall are going to fight, and then what happens with the title after that. Obviously, guys like Volkov, he's still out there. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he's definitely closer to a title shot than some people want to think he is. And rightfully so, especially after a win like this. And I got to say this just because when I was watching, you know me, obviously, I love my Dave's Hot Chicken. This is not an ad, obviously. I just love Dave's Hot Chicken. I think it's the best chicken in the world, personally. Seeing that ad on the Octagon was amazing. First of all, it stuck out like a sore thumb, just an obnoxious-looking yellow chicken just sitting there. But then, man, poor Sergey Spivac getting TKO'd on top of the Dave's Hot Chicken logo. That's just straight diabolical, dude. I felt so bad for him because I like Sergey Spivac. I think he's a really good fighter at heavyweight. Another guy who has potential to go further in the division maybe in the future. But to get knocked out on the Dave's Hot Chicken logo, that's just truly unfortunate. And my heart goes out to the poor guy, man. I don't know if you agree there.
It's pretty unfortunate. Maybe he went and had some Dave's Hot Chicken afterwards.
Maybe Armand did. Maybe that's why he fell out of the fight. Maybe he had, he didn't want to get to the weigh-ins. He's like, I'm in the mood for some chicken right now.
Yeah, and then spent a lot of time on the toilet.
Could you imagine if that was what? That's the real conspiracy theory. Imagine if Arman Tsarukyan didn't pull out of the fight because of a back injury. It's because he was like, you know what? I'm not making weight. I want some chicken tenders from Dave's Hot Chicken, and then because Khabib said it was like 1 a.m. when the fight kind of got canceled. So imagine if just Arman Tsarukyan was sitting on the toilet with some UFC sponsored Dave's Hot Chicken, just going through it, and he's like, man, I'm not going to be able to make weight, let alone get through this fight. It's over. It's so over. But, hey, let us know in the comments if you guys think that's actually what happened, because, hey, it's possible. They said it was a back injury. They never said if it was his upper back or his lower back. We never know what this man was going through. So, all right. With that, we might have to move on to the next fight before we go too far on that tangent. But let's talk about the opening fight on the main card with Renier de Ridder and Kevin Holland. This was a fight that I was very excited for. I think we both called this a sleeper fight when we were previewing it on the last pod. And Renier de Ridder, man, I'm always impressed by this guy, and I think that he's such a sleeper in the UFC right now. And he beats Kevin Holland in the first round via submission, rear naked choke, moving up the middleweight ladder. I know Kevin Holland's grappling at 185 isn't amazing, and people that's the first thing that they're going to say. But you have to think about RDR's body of work, even outside of the UFC, and won championship. This dude has proven it already that he's such a good fighter on the ground with his wrestling, his top control, his submission ability with his jiu-jitsu, whether it be on top or off his back. I think this guy is such a threat right now at middleweight, and I truly feel, why wait with this guy? Why wait? He wants a top 5 opponent next. I know he hasn't beaten anybody right now in that top 15 yet, but I think he's worthy of an opportunity. And my point of view is, right now there's a fight that's booked between Israel Adesanya and Nasruddin Imavov. I would love to see Reinier de Ridder fight the winner of that fight personally, but I don't know. Where do you think he's at right now in terms of his skill level compared to the rest of the division? Whether it's based on this fight or just your opinion in general.
Well, for one, as a middleweight, so Kevin Holland, for instance, moving back up to 185, so that I think
Kevin Holland wanted some Dave's hot chicken.
Yeah, right.
He said it multiple times. He doesn't want to live the lifestyle of a welterweight. I'm so sorry.
Exactly. No,
my mind is just in the Dave's
What I
gutter.
was getting at is, yeah, he's moving back up to 185 to 1. Sure, not live, however he says it, not live the life as a 170, but because it's gonna allow for more stand up and more punching and all that, and so that he can knock someone out on the Dave's Hot Chicken logo. But Reinier de Ridder presents such a unique challenge as it is, and as a 185er, how he's able to move so fluently and stuff. Kind of just like in a way, he's this might be a crazy outlandish take, and I'll take the heat for whatever, but
I think
like
RDR beats Anderson Silva. No, I'm joking. Sorry. I keep interrupting you. I'm like such an asshole today.
No, this could legit be as crazy as that, but
let's hear it.
I genuinely feel he's when Alex Pereira was fighting 185, Reinier de Ridder's a grappling Alex Pereira at 185. Just in the sense that whereas Alex is like so much bigger and stuff as a middleweight, where it's like, dude, clearly you should be fighting 205, and that's where you naturally walk around and stuff anyways. Reinier de Ridder, the way he moves, I even think we mentioned Cyril Gane before. I think it's like Cyril Gane as a heavyweight. Reinier de Ridder, I think, kind of presents that challenge as a middleweight, and he's a grappler, and he's able to tap people really at any given second of the fight. So when you present him with the Imavov or an Adesanya or any of these guys in the top 5, guys that can hold their own on the ground but aren't all that used to it, aren't all that comfortable with it, I think that's where you give RDR the advantage, and where I think why he's already able now to jump into that top 5 and beat somebody there. So otherwise, I don't think it would be that easy to just be saying, oh, give him the winner of Imavov and Adesanya. I think you would have to probably see another fight from him first. Someone in the top 10 for sure, but top 5 is, once again, that's another step up. So that's what I think for sure.
Yeah, I definitely could understand that. I mean, like I said, I kind of prefaced the whole point too with, I get it. It's against Kevin Holland, who's shown that he's not the same type of grappler at 185 as he is at 170. So it's like, I get it. It's a huge step up. For me, it's more so like what he's already done, even outside of the UFC. I mean, this dude was, I think, either a double or triple champ in one championship. So what this card presented and made clear, and just a good proper way to start the year in MMA and UFC and all that is that grappling is king, grappling is everything, and reigns supreme. And let's wrestle.
If you're not that, dude, if you're not capable of it, if you're not willing to hold your own on it, then MMA is just not the sport for you pretty much. But,
Yeah, that's what always bothered me with guys like Masvidal, like talking about like, oh, he's just, hugging me. He's a crotch sniffer, as they say. But like, if you want to fight a stand-up fight, then go kickbox. Like, this is mixed martial arts. If you can't defend the takedown, that's on you. That's not on the grappler.
Yeah, you have to at least be able to defend a takedown. You have to be able to sprawl and stuff, and you have to be at least, even if you don't so much pose the threat of being able to take someone down yourself, because like, how many times are you going to see Alex Pereira, for instance, shoot for a takedown and stuff? Like, when you're that good of a striker on the feet anyways, with your hands and with your legs, like, well, okay, I'm just gonna use this, whatever range there might be, I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna just flick a jab here and there, and if you're gonna if you're gonna shoot yourself into my range, then I'm either gonna defend it, or I'm gonna hit you with this counter hook or something like that, this counter right hook. That's how I feel, because obviously not everybody's Alex Pereira, but I think he's just kind of obviously that golden example right now of that. And then Israel Adesanya too, guys that come over from kickboxing, like, you can do it. You can hold your own as an MMA for sure, obviously. You just gotta be able. Yeah, it is super hard. Don't get me twisted. It is really freaking hard. It's even like training it lightly in the gym and stuff. Like, it's so tiring and stuff. And yeah, I mean, it could even just, guys obviously don't want, you're not trying to get hit and stuff, but some guys do, like, just get better as a fight goes on after taking damage and stuff and getting hit. Like, freaking think of Yuri, for instance, how Yuri can take all these shots and stuff and just keep throwing all this unorthodox kind of movement and combos and strikes at you. But that's not the goal, obviously, because these guys are professionals still at the end of the day, and that does matter. Those significant strikes do matter, and they add up towards the end of the fight, whether or not, and that's going to factor whether or not you win the fight, obviously. So,
well, I like your point too, just about kickboxers in MMA, and I think that the next fight that we're going to talk about is another perfect example of why it's so hard to kind of have that as your base. When you look at the feature prelim, Peyton Talbott versus Raoni Barcelos, Barcelos pulling off a massive upset according to the odds makers, obviously, against Talbott, gives him his first loss of his career. Although I will say this, I do think Barcelos was being disrespectful.
This is a perfect transition.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was just because Talbott, because some people were like, oh, well, this is a fraud check for Peyton Talbott. I don't agree with that. I think that Barcelos is an underrated guy. He's been around the game for a while. I said this last week. If you're not on top of it against him, he's a guy who's going to beat you. He's that perfect gatekeeper right outside of the top 15, and right now, Peyton Talbott just didn't have the grappling skills to deal with somebody like that. Not that he can't develop them. He's still really young. This is his first career loss. But Barcelos, he was being disrespected by the odds makers. I mean, he was plus 750 on a lot of the betting apps. That's crazy to me. I get Peyton Talbott is a highly touted prospect, but considering we hadn't really seen him have to prove it against a guy like Barcelos yet, we're talking about striking and grappling. Talbott on the feet looked pretty good against Barcelos, but when you can't defend the takedowns and get up when you're taken down, it doesn't really matter how good of a kickboxer you are, right? I mean, that's what you were just saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. Yep. So this fight in particular, even when you've got Barcelos on the other side, you got a guy pretty much with no expectations and no real pressure and stuff on him to go out and dominate Peyton Talbott. What was this, a 30-27?
That's a good question.
30-26?
I can find that.
Like, straight dominate a guy who's as favored as Peyton Talbott. You kind of just, you stick to the well, and you know that you're going to make a guy uncomfortable. That's what I mean. Like, grappling probably makes guys more uncomfortable than it does standing and actually getting hit, like, really hard on the feet. I think, once again, like I said, these are professionals at the end of the day, so you can't afford to get hit, but guys will, they're still fighters through and through. It's just they've been doing this a huge majority of their lives and stuff, and put so much into it. Like, you gotta embrace, when a guy is bringing the fight to you. So that goes for the ground as well, whether it's people like it or not. It's MMA at the end of the day. So.
By the way, 230-27s and 130-26. And shout out Chris Leben. I love that he's getting into like the officiating, judging. Same with like Frank Trigg. It's cool to see like former fighters starting to get into that, because I think that's a good way to solve some of the problems that we've been having with judging in the past. So maybe that'll get improved over time. Chris Leben scored at 30-27, so that's a pretty good scorecard. And but yeah, man, I mean, back to the fight itself, I agree with everything you're saying. And like I said, the only thing I'd really add is that I don't think this was a fraud check. I do think that Talbott still has so much potential. He's clearly a really good striker, but just got to defend those takedowns. And even if you can't develop the insane takedown defense that some fighters who are good stand-up fighters have, even if you could just improve the get-up aspect of it, like if you get taken down, just being able to pop back to your feet, I think that would do a lot for him too. And I still do see the potential. Like I say, he's young. It's his first loss. I think Barcelos is just a guy who kind of shows you where you're at a little bit. And I think Talbott, he seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders, and I think that he's going to improve, learn from this. And he's a fun dude, man. I want to see him succeed. I think that he's a guy who could be a fun fighter at bantamweight for years to come if he can improve that aspect of his game. And even if not, honestly, because he is such an exciting striker, I'm sure we're going to get some highlights from Peyton Talbott.
Yeah, dude. I mean, and then just to circle back to, I think, Gelton Almeida, for instance, and his composure, and just how we were talking about just the general theme of grappling as a whole. I mean, when it comes to clinching too, I feel like a lot of guys can be uncomfortable in the clinch and just feel the need to just kind of blow their gas tank, throwing strikes, and whether it's maybe like a foot stomp or trying to throw knees or just punches and trying to get the guy off of them. Like, that's another way where the guy who's more composed in the clinch and more comfortable with the clinch can kind of just withstand whatever's being thrown at him and just keep you up against the fence and control you that way, So that's what it is at the end of the day. Like, grappling is king. It's everything. So
come to Dagestan, brother.
Come to Dagestan.
Come to Dagestan. 3 years. Wrestle. Just wrestle.
You got the children training the way they do and stuff.
I saw a picture this week of Umar Nurmagomedov.
Oh, were you
talking? See that picture?
Wait, before that, were you mocking Islam, talking to Demetrius Johnson?
I've heard like him and Habib both say similar. I don't know if that's a direct. It might be a direct quote.
he was talking to Mighty Mouse on his podcast, like, "Come to Dagestan."
Did he say that to him? I know like the content you're talking about. Yeah. I don't remember if he said that specifically, but I'm sure he did.
Mighty was like, I gotta leave the kids alone. Because I was like, no, you bring
the kids. I knew. I never even seen that, and I was like, he definitely said bring the kids with him. Bring them too. Let them wrestle. Let's wrestle. That's a Conor McGregor quote. Talk about full circle. Oh man.
You said there was something about a picture.
Oh yeah, there was a picture that came out during fight week. It was of Umar Nurmagomedov when he was like a kid on a scale. He had to be like maybe like 12, 13 years old and just jacked, dude. I'm like, Jesus. What are they feeding these guys over there? Dude. But yeah, man, I that's another guy I think is going to be back in the title picture at some point very soon. But hey man, we already talked about that fight. But just overall, this entire card was so entertaining. There were so many entertaining moments inside the cage and outside the cage. I mean, I mentioned this twice earlier. So much breaking news. You start off with the fights that were booked for UFC 313. It's official in March. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev is a really fun fight. Then a 5-round co-main event with Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker. That's going to be an insane fight. But to start with the main event of that one, I think stylistically that's a really fun matchup, especially when I think about the fight between Pereira and Khalil Roundtree, because Roundtree, like Ankalaev, is a southpaw, and we've seen in the past that Pereira has some struggles against southpaws, And Magomed Ankalaev, I mean, the reason why I love this fight is because it's the champion versus the clear number one contender. It's a fight that needed to happen. And like I said, stylistically, Pereira has struggled in the past with southpaw strikers. And, Ankalaev is a really good striker himself. He's got good grappling, too. It's going to be a very high-level fight, I think, in that one. And that's a fight that's going to be very risky for the champion. And then the co-main event, I don't know if there's really much. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot you could analyze if you sit there and watch the film. But just, when you're looking at the two names on the paper, Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker, I think if there's not a finish, we're in for 5 rounds of just pure violence. And I'm so excited for that, man. That's going to be a huge fight at lightweight. And I can't wait to see what the rest of that card's looking like, man, because if that's the main and the co-main event, I hope there's some good fights before that, too, because we might have a similar night to this one at UFC 311 where we have a lot of really awesome fights from start to finish. So, but I'll ask you this, I guess, before we move on to the next little part of breaking news that I want to talk about before we go here. Which of those 2 fights are you most excited for?
So, here, what I'll say is, I think the obvious... Maybe not so much the obvious answer, because it is Alex Pereira fighting, yeah, sure, but Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker, a lot of people are going to be glued to for sure, but at least for the main event, at least this time around, I think it's a good time for this fight to be happening, with Ankalaev coming off his last win as well. I liked what I saw from him in that fight, whereas before that, I understood completely why Ankalaev was kind of being put on the back burner for the title fight. But
it's a risky fight for their most profitable champion at the moment. Really.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense now because Ankalaev does bring that side. I mean, he might even look bigger than Alex Pereira, to be honest with you, but. At least Alex, I think, in that sense, is probably going to fight this fight just a little more differently and stuff. Maybe not so much on the back foot and whatnot, but I think he will probably be maybe a little more gun shy and want the fight to just kind of progress over 5 rounds with someone like Ankalaev. Because, it's going to be really hard to finish someone like that. So, yeah.
It's possible.
I think so, yeah.
And then, the co-main event, though, it's just going to be a car crash. I was thinking this, too. Lightweight just has so many guys who are super exciting and might not be champions at the end of the day, but, Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker, Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier. I kind of just want to see maybe an event one time, a lightweight battle royale. Just maybe instead of, the cage, whatever the size it is now, triple it, and then they all start in a different corner, and then they just all fight. No teams, just a straight fight. I know the idea has been brought up in the past, maybe have a BMF belt tournament. That's not what I'm talking about. I want to just see all these guys brawl at one point, and whoever is the last man standing, I don't know what they get the title shot. That's how. See, we've solved the lightweight title picture. There you go. If Arman's not going to get the next shot, and we don't know what's next for Islam, just put 8 lightweights in the cage versus each other. All these killers, like I said, Gaethje, Hooker. You got Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier. Throw Arman in there, too. Why not? Charles Oliveira. Put McGregor in there. Throw him in there. Why not? Maybe even Tony Ferguson. Yeah. And then whoever's the last man standing, they get to fight Islam Makhachev and probably lose after that. Because I would imagine if you're getting in a battle royale, you're going to take a lot of damage in that fight. I mean, you're taking a left hook from Justin Gaethje, a knee from Charles Oliveira, and you win. You've knocked out 3 people in one night. That's pretty impressive.
That's it. All they would have to, or I guess you would put a timer on it. But if somebody gets finished,
no
they
time
just
limit.
Have to. Yeah, no time limit.
No time limit, brother.
No time limit. Everyone has to get finished. That's the last guy standing.
God, what commission would approve that? That'd be so crazy. Oh, it'd be so crazy. But yeah, to move on, because I don't even know how I could transition that into the next thing that we're talking about. But speaking of tournaments, See, there we go. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Speaking of tournaments, we have the next two coaches for the Ultimate Fighter. And I think that this is a really smart move by the UFC, what they're doing here. But the next two coaches of the Ultimate Fighter are Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen. The promo that they cut on the broadcast was hilarious. I mean, peak bad guy Chael Sonnen. I was juiced up, trained up, ready to go. Because DC said that he would have fought him at the end of this season, but Chael said no. So we're getting some beef. I love it, man. I think it's about time we get two coaches on the Ultimate Fighter that are truly just going to be just talking a lot of crap to each other. And hey, they're not going to fight at the end, but this is going to be entertaining, man.
Yeah, that's for sure what the Ultimate Fighter could use for sure.
We need some flair, man. I mean, like, we've gotten some good fighters from TUF in the past few years ever since it's returned, but we've kind of lacked that, like, reality show aspect of it because, you know, you got to remember, like, too, when TUF started in, like, 2003, 2004, whatever year that was, that was, like, in the peak of reality television. MMA wasn't as big of a sport as it is now, and like guys weren't training back then the way that they're training now, and a lot of these athletes that you see on the Ultimate Fighter are serious. They want that shot in the UFC. They're hungry, determined. They're not doing as much crazy things in the house, and I think because of that, you need two entertaining coaches, and the fact that they got DC and Chael to give some time, that's genius. And they're both great coaches too. They're known as leaders in their gyms. You know, DC, obviously one of the pioneers of American Kickboxing Academy, and then I've seen Chael Sonnen and TUF in the past. One of the better coaches I've seen on that show, truly cares about the fighters. I think that this is going to be a fun season, and it's honestly the most excited I've been for a season of TUF since they brought it back. So I'm definitely excited for that, man. I really am.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
But hey, dude, what a card! What a night in MMA. A lot of good fights, a lot of cool breaking news to talk about, and just a great way to start off the pay-per-view year for the UFC. One of 12, obviously. So I'm super stoked that we get to sit here and talk about this stuff. I enjoy it every time, and yeah, man, I think that next week, not exactly sure what's gonna happen yet in terms of videos. You know, there's a PFL card. Might try and throw something else together. You know, I'll let you guys know if that ends up happening. We talked a bit about it before the show. Don't want to say anything, though, if I can't figure it out. But either there'll be maybe a PFL type of video where we cover that card, or maybe something else. Time will tell. And if not, we'll see you guys maybe a couple weeks. Maybe we'll see y'all next week. But either way, it's been fun to chill with y'all this time. Subscribe if you enjoyed. Like the video, comment, all that. And we'll see y'all.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.